Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Storytellers. Thanks for tuning in. This is the show that we talk about visual storytelling with the greats that are at it these days. Today we have a double threat, a great comic book artist and an animator as well. Let's welcome Bret Blevins into the room.
Hello.
How you doing tonight?
So far, so good.
So far, so well. We'll correct that.
Yeah. Had a full day working on our book. So.
Oh, good. You're on issue 5?
Yeah, I've got the last. All 20 pages are down. I've got 5 traced off, ready to ink, and the others are getting there. So I think I'm going to print some of those out. On blue line.
Okay.
We'll see. It depends on what's on it, which way is easier. So.
Outstanding. And folks, in case you're wondering, we're talking about a series that's coming out in April from Aftershock called The Girls of Dimension 13, which I've written, and Bret is illustrating. And we're going to show you some of the artwork a little bit later. And we're also going to bring in our pal, Greg Wright, who did amazing colors on it. So let's start with the beginning for you, Bret. What got you into storytelling? Did you mean to go into comics, or did you have other aspirations?
When I was a kid, I think my aspirations were to be a book illustrator like Howard Pyle and N.C. Wyeth. I was getting those from the library. And plus just all of the kids' books that I loved, like The Borrowers had these marvelous pen and ink illustrations by Joe and Beth Crush. I used to love E.H. Shepard, who did the Wind in the Willows, Winnie the Pooh, the pen and ink. But as you recall, back in those days, you only saw that stuff if you came across it in the library. It was not like today where you could go searching.
Yeah.
So that's what I thought I was going to do. And then the paperback cover scene with Rosetta and Jeff Jones, those guys, I thought that's what I wanted to do. But by the time I was old enough to get started, that was waning. And, I always loved comics. But I have to be totally honest, I don't know that I really thought about drawing them until I was in my teens. As a kid, I didn't think about it. I loved cartoons like, Don Martin and Mad and things like that.
Right.
Doing continuity, I sort of fell in love with it after I was doing it. So
Interesting. So you had a little bit of a circuitous route. Thinking illustration first, and then you got into the narrative art form of it. Yeah,
and I think I fell in love with that, as I said, just by seeing the problems that came up that I had to solve, and then it became the main interest for me, was telling the story.
And who was your favorite comic book artist? The guy that was sort of steering you that way when you started to entertain the idea of entering that type of field?
If I had to pick one guy, sort of as a whole, it would probably have been Jim Aparo.
Nice.
Because of that era, that was his absolute peak when I was 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
And I also was completely knocked out by Bernie Wrightson and, Kaluta. But they almost seemed so far away that it was hard for me to grasp exactly what they were doing. And even though Aparo was just as sophisticated, he seemed more, I don't know, I could understand what he was doing better at that age. And
that's very interesting that you say that, because that's been a theory of mine too. As far as like when I look back at the people that influenced me, there were guys like Bernie Wrightson and Frazetta and Neil Adams, who drew in a way which seemed out of reach to me. I couldn't really. I loved looking at it and admiring it, but when I would see cartoonists, who kind of broke down the realism into a more decipherable language, I found myself gravitating towards those guys. And they're still sophisticated, but they're just different. It seemed more accessible to me.
Yeah, it was. And when I didn't realize this was going on at the time. This is me looking back. But I think something that appealed to me, is particularly about Aparo too, is, and again, I might not have been able to verbalize it at the time, but he was doing all this wonderful dynamic panel layouts, great acting, fabulous compositions. But everything served the story. He never did a grandstand shot. He didn't
Right.
just show up.
Right.
And something about that appealed to me. I felt like this guy is he's sticking to the job, in a way that I admire. I also should probably say that I'd always loved drawing since I was very small, but I think that I was extraordinarily lucky. I lucked into a set of the famous artist books, textbooks.
Oh.
I was 11. That would have been the set from the 60s. And then about a year and a half later, again, through incredible serendipity, I lucked into an original set from the 50s, which was just full of Albert Dorn drawings.
Yeah, yeah.
So reading those as a very young kid, I had already imbibed this idea that I was responsible to serve the author as an illustrator. So I didn't come in thinking that it was my place to show off what I was doing, but to sublimate what I was doing into the story and make sure my first job was to tell the story. And then I could do all the fancy drawing that would fit there, but not lay it on top.
Right, right. Did you ever get to meet Jim when you were in the Bat offices?
No.
Oh, you never did?
By the time I started drawing Batman, I'd already moved out here.
Okay.
So in Arizona, so I wasn't in the offices anymore. He's one of the few that got away. I met most of the people I wanted to meet, and I missed him. I'd never met Frank Thorne either, but
Frank's still alive.
Yeah, I know. There's still a chance.
Yeah.
But everybody else, I think I came across at one point or the other.
No kidding.
Even Kniff. I met Kniff.
Wow, that's neat.
Yeah.
How about Frank Robbins? Did you get to meet him?
He had passed away before.
I almost had the opportunity to meet one of my favorites, Roy Crane. He was supposed to be the headliner at a 1977 Orlando Con, and I was living in Florida at the time, and I went to it, and he died 2 weeks before the show.
Oh. Yeah.
2 weeks before the show.
Well, those guys were getting up there by then, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I should say I met everyone that I had dreamed of meeting who was within the age range that it was possible.
Yeah.
I obviously would have loved to have met Foster.
Right.
He died in 81, I think. So had he done cons, that might have been possible. But
the two guys I didn't get that were a big influence on me were John Buscema. I didn't get to meet him. And Kurt Swan.
Really, that's surprising about Buscema. He did a lot of shows.
He did, maybe, but I didn't.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah.
I didn't do any that he was at, that's for sure.
I have a funny little story about Kurt Swan. I went to see him once when he lived in either Westport or Norwalk, somewhere right when I was living down there. And I went over to visit him with Terry Austin. We might have even been taking some penciled pages over for him. I mean, ink pages to show him that Al and ink. I don't remember why we were there. But, you've seen a lot of artist studios. They're messy and really look like a workshop. Yeah. He had this room, a carpeted room, and he collected glass penguins, figurines. He had a lot of those in these very nice display shelves.
Okay.
Then he had a drawing board and a tabaret. And the Superman page he was working on was on the drawing board. He had a pencil, an eraser, and a glass of wine.
And a glass of wine.
That was it. And no, I didn't see any triangles there, but he did all that stuff freehand. The buildings.
Is that right?
Yeah, they were kind of they weren't like dead ruler lines, but they were accurate enough that you could give them, if you inked them, they would feel right. And Al, of course, did that beautiful sparkly line when he inked him. But yeah, I thought, wow, this is some serious organization. There's no reference around, no piles of stuff. It was just very lean.
Wow. And a glass of wine. That's the part that cracks me up. Yeah. You used to see these old cartoonists, especially the Connecticut crowd.
Yes.
Those guys used to drink and play hard. They'd get their shit done by 4 o'clock, and they're out in the golf course and the country club and all of that stuff. I mean, that's the life.
I don't know if they ever did this. I know Leonard was a workaholic, Leonard Starr. Mm-hmm. Him, and he shared a studio with Stan Drake. And I think maybe Stan had more time for golf when he was younger. He seemed to refer to that, but he was working all the time then too. And I remember often I would, I'd be driving to the FedEx box at 3 a.m. or something, and coming back through the main street, I'd see their lights on up there. They had a studio above a shop on the main street of Westport.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Was Stan working on stage then, or had he moved on to Little Orphan Annie?
He was. I think he was just like bleeding them over. He was just coming to the end of on stage. He was rapping. I know that Stan was just finishing. What was his strip?
Julia Jones.
Julia Jones, yeah.
Yeah.
He was just coming to the end of that, and he took over Blondie.
Right.
And Leonard did Annie. So they were when I got to know them, they were sort of just leaving the realistic stuff behind and switching over to the cartoony world.
Isn't it crazy to think about those guys doing those very idiosyncratic strips and making the styles?
Yeah. I remember Stan was kind of excited. When he was figuring it out. He didn't draw the backgrounds either. They had a guy who all this guy did was draw the lunch counter and the couch. And the
oh, is that right?
That's all he did. Yeah. I never saw him. He wasn't there in Westport, but Stan just did the figures. But he was figuring the characters out, and he was saying, "You got to see this." And he's drawing Dagwood, and he drew him like 4 or 5 times. And he said, "Watch this." And he took one of those strands of hair and just moved it like a fraction of an inch, and it suddenly didn't look like Dagwood anymore. He said, this stuff is like science. I can't move any of these proportions at all, or it doesn't look like the character.
I read that when he took it over, that he took like the did he replace Chick Young, or was somebody else doing it before?
I think it was Chick Young would have been really old by then, so I think it was someone.
Maybe it was his son that took it over afterwards.
Maybe his son was writing it. I'm trying to remember now. It's a long time ago.
Yeah. But I just remember reading that Stan would just trace the figures at first when he first started on it, so that all those proportions were right, and that he could actually make deadlines and stuff until he got into the rhythm of doing it, comfortably.
Yeah, I don't know that for a fact, but that sounds exactly like that sort of scientific approach she had.
Yeah. I think I read that in Cartoonist Profiles. Remember that magazine?
Yeah. I still have some.
Yeah, I do too. I saved some.
I have all the ones with the Roy Crane guide that he did.
I got those.
Yeah.
Those are awesome.
I think I have a Sickles one, maybe a Toth one.
Nice. I gotta do a show on Toth, because sometimes when I don't have guests, I'll do it on people that have cartoonists of the past, and kind of introduce people to their work that maybe have never heard of them before. Like Jack Cole. I did Jack Cole. I did Roy Crane, Frank Robbins. I did Ditko. Obviously, most people know Ditko and Kirby. I did them too, but try to show some stuff from their career that they might not have been familiar with.
Well, I noticed right away there's Crane behind you there. Buscema, see Kniff. That could be Robbins, I guess. I can't quite tell. Yeah.
That's let's see.
Or it could be Eisner.
Kubert. That's Kubert right there.
Kubert. Yeah.
Up here is Eisner.
Right.
Kniff is up. Oh no, that's not Kniff. That's Robbins.
Robbins. Okay.
All the way up on the right with the junk boat from China.
Yeah. And
then there's a Kirby, and of course you nailed the Crane.
Yeah.
And Buscema too.
Yeah, he's in there.
Yeah, I had fun making that.
Yeah, there's no end of beautiful stuff to dig up, that's for sure.
And with the internet now, I just turned Dan Fraga onto drawing a name, blank on the guy's name. He did Rusty Riley, Frank Godwin.
Frank Godwin, yeah.
He had never seen any of Frank Godwin's work, and his eyes are like, oh my God, he's voracious now. He's on the internet, constantly creating folders of Frank's work and stuff.
Well, he was a fabulous illustrator, amazing colorist, his sense of color. Yeah.
Of so many of those guys, I wish that the strip guys had more love for them, because so much of what everybody is copying, the young guys are copying copiers of those guys. Yeah. It's like, why don't you look back and see where the source material, and figure out, well, how did that style come about? You know, I love doing that.
I have a
suspect
theory
you.
about that. Yeah, that I've noticed a lot of young people, even though we think that the web is this amazing tool for tracking down all this stuff, but we also sort of know what to look for.
Right.
And I think a lot of young cartoonists might not be aware of these guys because, you know, they're not looking at the same few books about comics that we saw when we were young. That always had Kniff and Foster,
Right.
and, you know, the beginning guys in there. So you sort of knew about them even if you hadn't seen much of their work. And it's very easy to have a professional career and never come across that stuff now.
Yeah. So what was it like for you working with the great Al Williamson?
Oh, it was fabulous. I mean, I was there about 6.5 years, I think.
No kidding.
Yeah, at the studio, and I'd known him maybe a year before that.
And how did you hook up with him in the studio?
I was drawing a job of the Hulk, an issue of the Hulk for Carl Potts. I was penciling it, and it was the regular inker on the book was Jrjr Talek or Talaic. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name.
Oh, yeah, I know who you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think it's Talek.
Talek. And my friend Brent Anderson, I shared a studio then with Brent Anderson, Joe Chido, and Bill Sienkiewicz. And so Brent was getting ready to move back to California, and he was sort of making the rounds and visiting a lot of the friends he'd made and people he knew, but he didn't have a car. So he asked me if I'd like to meet Al Williamson on the condition that I could drive him up to Pennsylvania. So that's what I did. And I had this job with me, so I showed it to him. It was about half done. And he said, "Oh my God, I'd love to ink this." And I did the cartoon thing, you know, where I passed out and my feet went off the floor with a little puff of smoke. So when I got back down to New York, I went into Carl and said, "Oh my God, you know, I want to ink this. Is there any way we can make this happen?" And he found Jrjr another job for that month. And then I'll ink that job. And we just became friends and were talking a lot during that time. And he was still penciling a few things then. He drew an issue of the Star Wars comic. And I remember I was up visiting him and he gave me the job to bring in. So I was just, you know, able to study all that stuff. But then he said, "You know, why don't you come up and work in the studio?" And so I thought, you know, why not? So we moved up there, and I mean, he had such a marvelous archive of stuff. It was like being in a cartooning and illustration museum.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, there was just so much inspirational stuff, and he was just a great, fun guy to work with as well. He was very young at heart and loved all the great stuff and inspired. You know,
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's
we had a
really
routine where we'd meet early and drive out to this place called Donamite Donuts. It had his favorite donuts. We got our donuts and coffee. We'd come back and sit there for maybe a half hour, an hour, just looking at something great, you know, and just fusing about it. And then we'd be all pumped up to go work. So
yeah, that stuff. Looking back at the stuff that inspired me as a kid is the same stuff that inspires me now when I draw a blank. You know,
Oh, yeah.
You got a blank piece of paper in front of you and you just can't figure out what the heck to put down or how to solve this narrative problem on the page. You know, I'll just put the stuff away and I'll pick out a Kubert book or a Kirby book or something like that, and I'll just start leafing through it. You know, I won't read it. I'm just leafing through it and looking at the visuals and stuff and sort of like pulling it all into the library of my brain, you know.
Right.
And then, you know, about half an hour later, I'm like, yeah, I got it now, you know.
Well, it's pure. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
In terms of the form, that's the groundwork of the form. Because you have, going back, if we're talking about adventure cartooning, you know, realistic adventure, you have, you know, the Bible was composed by Foster, and then the New Testament by Sickles. And then Kniff sort of fused cinematic techniques with this chiaroscuro that Sickles invented. And that covers everything you can do. Everything else is a variation of that. And I think when anything is sort of in its initial stages of being discovered and picking up traction, there's an energy and a purity to it. I mean, you can see it in any art form, in film and music, you know, jazz to pop to rock and roll. The early days of it have all this discovery happening very quickly.
Right.
And because it's a new thing, and it's, you know, as technology comes along and people jump on that, and so you get that bedrock of things that can be done, and then you can build on that. The later generations can do modifications of it. But if you go look at Kirby at his peak, it just does not get any better. Certainly doesn't get any more powerful. You can always get strength from that.
It's so immersive too. The three tenets of storytelling that I always preach are clarity, dynamics, and immersion. And that's the key to telling great stories. And Kirby's stuff was always immersive. It was always right in front of you. It pulled you into it, and it immersed you into even as ridiculous as, let's say, a sequence in Devil Dinosaur, maybe. But you believe it. He makes you believe it. As ludicrous as a sequence could be, he has you biting it, like a bass on a hook.
Yeah. Well, I think the key is that he believes it.
Yes.
I think that's where all this comes from. When you look at that oddness of Ditko's approach to everything, that was something he cared deeply about.
Yes.
And even through the oddness of his drawing in certain ways, that passion for the subject is there, and you feel it.
There's truth to it. There's an honesty to it, and it comes across when you get a journeyman who's just putting down the stuff because, okay, this is what a cowboy looks like, this is whatever looks like, without that passion behind it, without that it. Like Kirby could draw that kind of stuff, and it didn't matter that it really looked like that. Like when he drew westerns, he drew the worst 6 guns in the world. They looked like double action revolvers, instead of single actions, and the inkers usually had to fix them. But there was so much sincerity in it, that you bought.
Well, I think that all these great guys we're talking about, they drew emotion over literal transcriptions of reality, which is the stuff that. Or that's the stuff that comes alive and really communicates to you, I think.
I couldn't agree more.
Because I admire amazing draftsmen and people who can do this incredible technical things. But if it doesn't make me feel something, it's not my favorite. Right.
That's why, we talked a little bit earlier. I said that that's the guys that leaned a little bit more towards the cartooning, the Robins and the Kniffs and stuff versus the Fosters and the Raymonds, to me always had much more energy in the work, because by stripping down the drawings of all the fine details and stuff, you're left with the extremes. So when you've got a guy that's angry or sad or something, to push that sadness or anger visually, it's so much more energetic when they're cartooning versus illustrating.
I agree, and sometimes it's hard to find that balance, because when we came into the business, a more realistic surface effect was the fashion of the day.
Right.
And so trying to find a way to animate that stuff and stretch the forms and give it that extra bit of oomph without going completely into the realm of caricature.
Right.
I'm still struggling with that. That's the challenge always,
Yeah. I thought Buscema really, really did it well, because he had that draftsmanship, and then he got Kirby-fied with the dynamism, but then he still cartooned, like when the guys would grit their teeth or they'd be screaming, it'd be like, just over exaggerated, and yet he still had all the realistic or semi-realistic proportions to the point where it seemed real to you, without, like you said, going into Mad Magazine versions,
Right. And I think that he was following that Stan's, one of Stan's dictums in the early days was a silent movie acting times 10. Because you only had the one panel to get it across,
right?
Taken from Kirby's lead, of course. But I think Buscema really found a great way of adapting that to a more. It seemed realistic, even though no one could actually stand with their feet 12 feet apart. He made it look like it could happen.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at his work, like when he was working at Dell, it was much more subdued, well drawn, of course. But like even when he was drawing like Barbarians or Hercules or whatever that strip was he did over at Dell, he wasn't pushing the drawings as much. They were still, I think he was still stuck in that the kind of Alex Raymond uh, sort of realistic look until he discovered, the Bible of Kirby. And that's when his stuff really came alive, I think.
I think he was probably requested to do
Speaking
that.
of somebody I'm sorry?
I said, I think Stan probably sort of urged him to do that. I think
so. I that's what I've read, is that, when he finally talked him into coming over to Marvel, he gave him a whole bunch of like Kirby books to look at, and to study, and he said, this is what we're looking for.
Well, it's always been fascinating to me to see how Buscema interpreted that guidance and Gene Colan interpreted it completely different way, but they both have that wonderful energy and dynamism.
Yeah. I think that like the heir apparent to that kind of Kirby-fied energy, to me, modern-wise, is Jrjr.
Yes. Yeah.
Romita Jr. really, I think, broke down that that Kirby energy. Like when he was doing Thor, whenever he does those Kirby books, they're like the Eternals that he did. I thought that stuff is just so great. It has that Kirby feeling, and yet it's completely John's work. Yeah.
Well, he has a almost a, I don't know what you would call it. He has almost a more modern graphic design sensibility that he brings to it as well. The way he places blacks and that sort of thing. It's almost it has that power, but it almost has a elegant quality to it at the same time.
Oh, very much so. He takes a linear approach to things, and then uses even line for shading. Not cross-hatching, but just like line that's going around and describing the forms.
Yeah. Well, I was in the studio with Al when Al was inking Daredevil over Jrjr.
Oh, no kidding.
Got to see all that stuff close up. In fact, I inked parts of it anonymously to meet the FedEx guy coming, But and so I learned a lot from that as well. Yeah, and he's, again, everything follows the storytelling. Story's always first. Yes.
Yeah, he's not concerned about crazy panel layouts. He'll do a 6-panel grid, and it'll be like looking at a storyboard. It's just boom, 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 and again, it brings you in, and it's immersive. Hey, look who's here.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, how are you guys?
Hello.
Wow. I haven't seen the beard. You're very professorial looking.
Well,
what's next? You're going to shave your head too?
He doesn't need to shave his head.
I know. He's got that good mop top there of hair.
I liked it better before it got gray. It's very funny listening to you guys talk about all these guys that I got to work with when I was at Marvel, especially Stan Drake, who Bill Sienkiewicz actually brought him to my office saying, "Can you give this guy some work?" Because nobody knew who he was, and I was like, "This isn't the Stan Drake, is it?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I kept him pretty busy. But then there was a particular editor at Marvel that had asked him to do samples. So Howard Mackey and I went down and had a little conversation with that editor to explain that, who Stan Drake was, and that, you don't ask Stan Drake to do samples, you just hire him.
Wow.
But there's a guy that had endless stories about, all those guys from the strip days. And he had a wild life too, boy, I'll tell you. But he would downplay it. Oh yeah, he would complain. Yeah, he would tell me how he would just cut his old strips up into bit and pieces and then reglue them down to save time. I'm like, oh, please don't tell me that.
Yeah, I remember looking through a lot of those. He had a closet full of them, and a lot of them had holes in them, but which is kind of sad. But it was still fun to look at.
But those guys thought of that stuff as commercial work. Once it was printed, it had no intrinsic value to them.
Yeah.
I remember Kubert telling me about they would take at the Syndicate if they spilled coffee. you know, they would take a Hal Foster original to mop up the coffee.
Yeah.
You know, because it had no value to these guys. You know, did you shoot it? Okay, you can wipe. You can, you know.
Well, Ditko had it all piled up in his office. You know, like holding open a window or something. Just piles of this stuff like it was nothing.
Well, I know Alex Nino, at least in the 70s, he used to cut his pages up to make packaging material to send new jobs in.
Wow.
You know,
That's crazy.
I know. It was a different era, you know. You know, and I guess you could, no one valued it, including the artists. It became cumbersome to hang on to it, you know.
Yeah.
They didn't realize that it was actually going to be worth something.
Yeah.
You know, people used, you know, they used to give it away or, you know, sell it for, you know, $10 a page. And now you look on eBay and, you know, you'll find a John Buscema piece, you know, that's, you know, $35,000 that, you know, John never saw that kind of money for those things. You know, he would get his stuff and out it went. You know, he had an agent that just sold the stuff and he just collected it. And I don't think he realized up until he started doing Wolverine that these pages were actually valuable, because once he started doing Wolverine with, he had Al on him at one point and he had Klaus on him. Suddenly he could sell those pages were worth a lot of money. So he actually started trying to draw more of those big figures that were popular at the time because it made those pages sell better. Except for he made it work. You know, it never kind of looked like, look at me, I'm drawing a pinup page.
Right.
It still worked as a good page. You know, went, well, let's try to get one good Wolverine figure on here. And that was beautiful stuff, you know.
Well, Bill Gaines was one of those guys who was ahead of his time because he knew the value of that art. He saved all that stuff, you know, just archived it and everything. And so when, who was it that did those hardcover reprints?
Russ Cochran.
Russ Cochran, yeah. When Russ Cochran, you know, they shot that all from the originals.
Oh, that's why that stuff looked good.
Yeah.
I remember occasionally something would have gone missing and they had to use silver prints, but the silver prints were so beautiful that they look like originals too. They picked up all the grays.
Right. Wow, it's unbelievable to think that all those great EC artists, that all that artwork was archived in one spot at one time.
And he was I remember he began to sell that stuff in the 80s and he made sure the artists got their cut.
No kidding.
Because I remember he and Al on the phone often discussing what was coming up in the next Cochran books. And when he sold the artwork, I forget maybe it was half. He might have split it with the artist. I don't remember. But
you know, that brings up an interesting question. I'm curious what you guys think about this. In the fine art world, there are almost like letters of transit. So you sell a piece of artwork, and then when that artwork is sold, a percentage of that profit is returned to the original artist. These are like contract things that get added to it, and it's not unusual in the fine art world to have those things. And Barry Smith had started doing that in comics, selling if you sold his work, you had to sign this agreement that if you sold that, let's say he sold this thing for $20,000 to this guy, and then it rises up to $40,000. There's a $20,000 profit there, and that the original artist is owed a percentage of that capital gain on it. What do you guys think about that?
I think that's a good idea. I don't know how prevalent it is, but
good for Barry if he was able to get that.
Yeah, I've seen other guys, and I've got some paperwork on it too that I saved, the files. It was written in the 70s, I think, and updated. And it's something you can attach to your original artwork. I've never done it, but I was just curious if you guys had heard about that or even considered that. As something
in the fine art world, it may be a law in California. I'm not sure about that, but I remember reading about that, if you resold paintings. I don't know if it's universal though. In
other parts of the world, other countries, they have different rules on royalties too. Because when I worked in the newspaper strips doing the Phantom for King Features, they didn't pay royalties for nothing. You know, you got paid your crappy rate and that was it. But what they couldn't deal with was that certain countries collect money on stuff that's licensed, and they hold that money and give that to the artists. There's a it's the author, I think it's called the Authors Coalition, and if you go on it and have had stuff reprinted in other countries, your name could be on a list there. And if your name's on the list, they have a tally of the money you're owed. Wow. And I found out about that, and I went to it, and I saw my name on the list, so I filled out the forms and everything. I got a check for $5,000.
Wow.
In royalty money from overseas reprints of my work.
Wow. That
the syndicates just wouldn't give it.
Well, they do have a lot more respect for aesthetics in Europe.
Yeah.
So they value the artists more there, I think.
Right.
I'm surprised you guys.
Remember, the mob is called a syndicate too, so
yeah.
draw your own conclusion.
I'm surprised you even got your strip work back that on any of your stuff.
I never sent it in. I scanned it.
Is that how it works today? They don't make you send it in. You can send it in digitally.
Oh, yeah. They would hate to have to do that, to photograph it or scan it or have somebody do that. You know, no. You format it, you send it, you do everything, and you don't get paid anymore.
No.
to do it.
The artwork.
Huh?
At least you have the artwork.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they would have had to return it anyway. I know when I negotiated my contract, I said I own the artwork, even though they said, "Oh, well, that's not how we do it." And I said, "Well, that's how I'm doing it."
Good for you.
Yeah, because I don't have to mail it into you, so I'm keeping it.
Yeah, everything I did for Disney, they kept it. And that was part of the contract, and I didn't like that because I'm a big Disney geek, so I wanted that back, just as a fan to have this stuff back, but nope.
I remember Al Williamson had a deal that he got all the artwork back from the Star Wars strips that he did.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, that was inspiring stuff to look through because they were pretty big, the Sunday pages.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've got the artist edition of his that IDW printed. It's the biggest book I own. It's larger than any of the other books. He really worked large on that stuff.
Oh yeah, I think the biggest one I have is the Foster one. It's still not as big as the artwork, but it's huge.
No kidding. I've seen some Foster originals at conventions, and I'm blown away that he could work that big and still get it done in a week.
Yeah, and just the fact that his arm was long enough to work that big, I mean, his board was almost vertical, so I guess that's how he did it.
But they always cut those. They always cut those tiers too.
I think they did that for mailing, but maybe he cut them first. I don't know.
Yeah,
I've seen some that were just folded. They weren't cut.
Folded like on the gutters.
Yeah.
So it wasn't across a panel.
Wasn't across the panel. It would be in the gutter so they could fit it in a mailing package.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then they would cut it up anyway when it got to the setup and printing, because different papers had different formats, and so they had to cut and reshoot. So that's why all those panels are always cut up, and then there's tape on the back of them, because that dropout tier would be gone for some panels, or they change it to a tabloid, or it's crazy how that stuff used to work.
I know, it's amazing that the writers had to come up with throwaway sections of the strip that could be cut out without hurting the story. I mean, yeah, I think that would be frustrating, but
yeah, you can't advance the plot in that tier.
Yeah.
So you can have some pithy dialogue or something like that, but it can't advance the plot.
Well, we were talking before about young artists not knowing about some of the old strip guys. I mean, a conversation like this wouldn't even make any sense to someone who didn't understand how newspapers worked in the old days. So,
well, that's true.
Why would you cut pieces of the story out? What the hell are you talking about?
Right. You talk color separation, right, Greg? Can you imagine going on and discussing Rubylith?
Yeah. I was explaining it. There was a panel with colorists at one of the conventions. They did it virtually. That they didn't bother to ask me, so I decided I would just hang out, and they got everything wrong. Because I have cut those ruby liths, you know, and I went up to Connecticut and saw the old ladies doing the old, you know, there were 3 sheets of acetate for every single color, so it was like 9 sheets stacked, and they had to, you know, 1 shade of color at a time. And I thought, oh my God, how can you do this? So then, of course, I did a couple of posters that way for Marvel. I stepped them myself and was able to do the airbrushing. I had gone up and saw Murphy Anderson, and he showed me how they did everything. And I had a whole new set of respect for just the craft of doing a sep, you know. And again, they're not even artists. Half of the people that are doing this, that's just their job to blob color onto this little section or that little section. But it made it made it all make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, today, you know, it's all digital, so you're just painting onto it. But I still think in terms of the CMYK colors. So I know how it's going to print when I put a color down. I go, okay, this is going to look like this. It's not going to suddenly look different, because, you know, if you remember when the seps were really bad at one point, and it should be orange and yellow fire, and it would be brown or green, or, you know, this page, you know, or each page would look different because they gave it to different people to do the seps, and they didn't understand how the CMYK works. So they would add blues and grays to things that they could, on the monitor you couldn't see it, but when it printed, it was just god awful. So it's a lot more interesting now that I can say, okay, I'm going to make sure it's the color that I want, and the only thing I have to worry about is if the printing goes awry. Yeah,
much more rare these days. They do a much better job these days.
Yeah, it's much better. So I do things a lot differently in the last couple of years, because the printing has gotten to that point where I can say, okay, I can now trust these 4 things, so I don't have to do that. I can now do this other thing that's a lot easier and lets me have a lot more control over, you know, the fun stuff to make it look cool. The book we're working on is getting a lot of advantage from all the the new techniques that I learned, because I can trust the printing now.
Well, since you've brought that up, this would be a nice segue to talk about the book and show people some of the imagery that Bret has done and that you have worked on as well. So what we're talking about, gang, is a new series, a 5-issue series from Aftershock called The Girls of Dimension 13. And it's a sort of a female empowerment coming of age story that if you were to mash up Doctor Strange and the Girls of Apartment 3G, you'd get this. And that's how I pitched it to Bret. As a matter of fact.
Except you said Doctor Strange's, Ditko's Doctor Strange.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
I should have made sure I said that again, because there is no Doctor Strange other than Ditko. I mean,
well, there's a lot of other great interpretations, but that stuff is, is so charming.
Yeah. Because how do you write stuff like, draw some existential,
other dimensions.
Yeah. How do you describe that? But Ditko created a language that we could actually communicate with now. Like when I wrote the script, I could tell you something and I know you'd get it because, you understand that language, that Ditkosian, if you will.
I like that. We should codify it in a book you can study.
Yeah, really.
Ditkosian. Yeah.
In fact, we like Ditko so much, I named a character Ditko in the story.
Yeah.
So here's the main cover by Bret. Isn't that awesome? And colored by Greg. Look at that.
I love that magenta that he
yeah. And I love the way that you interpreted this Abraxas character. I described him as this, sort of a John Carpenter's The Thing when he's, morphing into all the different shapes, just sort of, nothing really no actual form type of thing. And on I did the variant cover, and I did it before Bret had actually locked down the look for this character. And you can see my version is much more closer to like what I was describing, the John Carpenter thing, but his is so much better. I love all the eyes and the teeth, and it's so great.
In my mind, he's never the same twice either. He's like always roiling,
Right,
sliding and moving while you're talking to him.
yes.
Talking. And that's a lot of fun. He reminds me a little bit of working with Warlock from the New Mutants, because whatever shape you need him to be for the composition, you can bend him that way.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, he does have more or less of a body with arms and legs, because it's very hard to do acting without some kind of human relationship to the limbs. But occasionally he has an extra foot sticking out, or some fingers or something.
Yeah, or teeth, or
tentacles or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I picked out a little action scene in the story here in the first issue to share with the viewers, so they can get a feel for what's happening here. Greg, you chime in when you want to say something about your approach to how you colored it and stuff.
Well, Bret's pretty easy to color. I mean, he's, when I first got into the industry back in the 80s, artists actually did what I call complete art. So it didn't require the color to, make sense of it, to give it depth. It didn't need it for the storytelling. And that's how Bret draws. It's all very complete. So, when I go in, I have to say, okay, how do I not ruin what he's done? Because, if you just look at all of his figure work on here, especially, you see the body language of every single character is very specific for that character. And, it's very charming, and you really get it. But it could easily be ruined by doing too much. So I generally approach, like with Bret, I kind of look at it like a Disney film. And I start in with the background. So if I can establish, okay, it's a dirty subway. If I do nothing else to the characters, it's going to work, because he's done all the work with the characters. They don't really require a tremendous amount of rendering. They don't require me to draw your eye to the characters. He's done the work, and that's it's kind of an old school thing, because now sometimes you look at some of the new guys and they're black and white, and you're like, where am I supposed to look?
Right.
So, on this, it really was just, it's like, okay, I pulled a bunch of reference from, the subways that I used to ride in the city, and, let the girls do their thing. I
remember when I drew the sequence, I was just checking subway reference to make sure, see how much they changed. I haven't been on one since the early 90s, I guess. And there was no graffiti on any of the new references. So, I was originally thinking I could use that for some design. I thought, oh my gosh, they cleaned them up. So
yeah, that's true. This is a hard scene to draw because of the confines. You've got a very narrow widthwise stage to work in when you're drawing inside a subway. So it's not as easy as you think. This is a very difficult scene to choreograph, and Bret does it very, very well here. He does a little Hitchcocky in action, where you extend things, as needed,
Fish-eyed a little bit.
Yeah, they're little visual cheats that still give the information you need without taking you out of the story. And this like the width here. But it's so great. Look at the eye flow here. This is wonderful stuff.
What I remember about this page is they were just coming back from surfing at the beach, so I was actually trying to make it look as if their hair was kind of saltwatery and full of not quite, combed correctly.
Right.
That's what I remember. I'm looking at this now.
Yeah. They were surfing at Long Beach, Greg.
Yeah.
In the story.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just out there. I was out there again on Sunday, and it's funny. There were even it was cold. There was guys out there surfing in the wetsuits.
Oh yeah. Nothing stops those guys.
So you could have put them in
Hurricanes.
wetsuits, Brett. You didn't have to show so much skin. Jeez.
I didn't think about that.
Hey, we got to sell this stuff. And besides, it was summer.
Yeah, that's right. It was summer.
This is summer.
I also really like that Greg chose a different color for each of the girls' magic. So that's another storytelling. Yeah,
Storytelling. That's, you know, you got to tell the story. I mean, when you're going to put the color on, you got to tell the story in the color with the color as well. Otherwise, you know, I've seen so many comics ruined by color that didn't follow along with the storytelling. And you know, as people that buy this, I think they're going to be really thrilled because it just gets more visual as you continue on.
Yes.
So for me, it was fantastic because this is some of the best work I think I've ever done. You know, I mean, over your work, because every page is like, okay, I have to rethink an entire new world of color to tell this part of the story. Now this part of the story. So when you go to, you know, Larry Hama used to talk about, you know, you want to, when kid opens a comic and you go to flip through, you want to keep them flipping. And one of his things was have a cliffhanger at the bottom of every page. But the other thing is, if it all looks the same, you don't really know. But there's not one page of this that kind of looks the same from page to page. You know, I think you know, people that really are looking for something really visual are going to just die for this. I really do feel they will. Yeah, and not just the color. You know, it's everything you look at. It's like, who could think this stuff up?
Yeah, as Bret goes along too. I mean, as you said, he's got more visual stuff to draw, but you know, he really, it just gets better and better. You know, when the art pages come in, they're just better and better, and the color is better and better, and because it's getting wilder and wilder because there's various dimensions, and it's not just dimensions that look like ours, but they just happen to be something different. You know, we have one that's a dimension of abstraction, and so everything in there is abstract, and Bret, you know, really captured the environment of what, you know, it would be if everything was seen through an abstract lens, and then Greg had the unenviable task of having to color that kind of stuff and tie it all together.
It was so much fun.
It's just gorgeous.
Well, I was really thinking, you know, based on the description, that everything is splintered somehow. The optics are splintered, but they still have to be recognizable as individual characters when they interact with the girls. So I was actually wondering how Greg was going to color that, and he just came through flying colors. Yeah.
That was one.
That was a pun I didn't intend.
I wanted to show more pages from other issues, but those haven't been released yet, so I didn't want to do that and jump the gun. So we're just limited to a few pages from issue 1, which comes out in April. I think the cutoff date is at the end of March for the isn't that what they said in our meeting, Bret? End of March was the cutoff for final orders.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember.
Yeah. So I put the link in here to the previews. So you can click on it and it'll take you to the previews page that has the first issue available. So you can tell your retailer, your local comic book shop, or I don't know if you can order it directly through previews or not. I'm not sure how that works. But the link is in there, is in the comments.
Because it's you know, it's you know, this is definitely one of those comics that the covers are going to grab people, and then they're gonna flip through it and they're gonna go, I got to buy this. Oh, I love this page.
Yeah, this is cool. Yeah, see the girls at this point don't really know who they are or what they are. They're sorceresses. You know, they have these abilities, you know, and they kind of tap into a mystic energy that surrounds everything. And they're able to access it without knowing how or why they do it. And they're all gathered together in New York from this mysterious woman gathers them there, but to teach them these things, because it turns out that she's a gatekeeper to the other 12 dimensions. And the apartment that they're in New York is the nexus point for it. And so she stands guard to make sure that this creature, Abraxas, can't get to our dimension. And but he does. And the girls are forced to a step up and learn really quick. So this is a sequence where Abby, our protagonist, turns this guy's or removes the bones from this guy's arm as he was about to assault her friend Cece.
Yeah,
and then
real creepy.
Yeah, I love that. It looks so rubbery, like you could just go. That has to hurt like hell.
Mm.
And this is actually the first time they both realize they both have these abilities. None of them know the other people have it. So she asks him, "Where did you send him?" She goes, "I never know." This is a great shot. I love this panel, Brett.
With a unicyclist?
Yeah. This is the kind of thing that strip guys know how to do, to take a panel that has nothing going on in it and make it interesting.
Yeah, there's a really classic trick there too of throwing the small figures you want the reader to look at in silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
Like silhouette, their eyes go right to them.
Exactly, and you have your action in the foreground.
Yeah, and it's like a pleasant distraction, but it doesn't kill the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't take you out of it, but it just gives you some bit of interest, to look at. I love that. And here's the painting that describes the 13 dimensions. So I think those are the only pages I pulled. I didn't want to show too much.
So that painting took me longer to do than like any 3 pages.
There's a lot of color on that.
There's about 7 different layers of stuff on that painting, and then I colorized all the line art, and all of it's completely there's so many different colors of line art that I had to colorize on it. I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, this painting will never show up again. It shows up several more times.
Yeah, it does though.
Yeah.
Didn't we pull it out and you made a master shot that you could use?
No, you never sent me like a clean one. So
are you sure?
Maybe it doesn't show up again. So
I thought I had done that. I seem to remember it. But
we talked about it a couple of times, but you were busy doing the actual pages of the book.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, he's so far along that it doesn't show up again now. So if we go on to another 5-issue series, we'll make sure you get a master shot of this thing.
A library shot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, I was thinking of actually making it like a story.
They're actually in the painting, somehow. That would have been like. That actually would have been cool.
So let's see who's in the chat here. I just saw Bob Budiansky pop in. Where does he go?
Hi, Bob.
Here we go. Hi, Brett and Graham and Greg. I appreciate that you did research on what subways currently look like, but I challenge you to find in any of your reference women who dress like that and ride the subways. In all the years I took New York City subways, I never saw anyone dressed like that. Maybe I took the wrong subways. Still beautiful work. Yeah, you took the wrong subways, Bob. You didn't take the ones that were coming from Long Beach.
No, they do. They look like that. You see people dressed like that all the time. Actually, not as much on the subway, but on the Long Island Railroad, I would see people all the time coming and going from the beach in the summer, and you would see girls dressed like that or with lasts on at times.
Whenever I've been near a beach, it seems like they're dressed like that all over the place on buses.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty accurate to Long, and carrying surfboards on the subway. So
yeah. I mean, I grew up on Long Island and in Florida, and I can tell you, beach communities, they do Coney Island too. You'll catch the subway or the L train going out to Coney Island. You'll see people dressed like that too. So Let's see if anybody's got some questions for the guys here. We'll say hello to our group. Somebody give some love to Godwin. That's cool. I'm going back. We're hitting earlier parts of the conversation. This is your long lost cousin, Bret, Brian Blevins.
Wow. Okay.
Gremlin, I had to collect everything Bret Blevins growing up because he was the first Blevins I ever saw in print. He was a celebrity my whole life. Even now, I'm psyched he is here. Oh, very cool, Brian.
I wonder where he's from.
Yeah, I'm not sure where Brian's from.
Maybe he'll pop. Maybe he'll like ask him.
Yeah, if you're still here, Brian, put it in the comments section. We'll scroll down to it.
Yeah, it's not a very common name, but I did find out, if Brian doesn't know this, actually my brother's name is Brian. It's spelled differently, but I found my son had to do a book report years before the internet on the lineage of his name, and we found out that it's Welsh and it means little wolf.
Oh.
And they had a coat of arms and everything. It was very cool. I had no idea.
So Blevins is Welsh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm Welsh.
There you go. It must be why we're making such a good art team here.
That's why. Well, it's funny because I've actually known Bret almost as long as I've been in the industry, because I started working at Epic Comics, and when I started at Epic Comics, there wasn't very many good artists. Only people like Bill Sienkiewicz and Frank Miller and John J. Muth. But there was this guy with a long hair and a beard named Bret Blevins who was doing a book called oh my God,
The Boz Chronicles.
Boz Chronicles. Which I completely, and Al Williamson was sometimes inking it. So he was Bret was one of the first guys I actually met in the industry, because I was working, for Archie Goodwin. It's like Walt Simonson, Bret Blevins, Al Williamson, Bill Sienkiewicz. So, my introduction to actual real people in the industry was like the cream of the crop.
Well, Archie attracted the great people to him. So.
Oh, yeah.
Archie was a great person, so
yeah,
makes sense. Let's see. I was 12 or 13 when I first started going to my local comic shop for a weekly pull list, and two of my earliest comics I added and have the fondest memories for because of their excellent covers by Bret were Strange Tales 1 and Solomon Kane 1. Man, that stunning cover. Bravo, Bret.
I remember that cover. It was a gouache painting. I was always leaping at the chance to paint anything back then. And often you just didn't have time. The schedules were too tight. But
sure,
yeah,
that's cool.
I think Carl. I think all of the first 5 or 6 were painted. I think Carl had a different artist paint each one, as I recall. I know Bill did one. I think Kevin Nowlin did one. I think.
Well, Carl was the only one. When Carl was one of the guys on staff that was actually able to be allowed to hire somebody to paint a cover. Carl had Carl could do everything, but he knew how to somehow wrangle Jrjr into saying yes to almost anything that he wanted to do. So he was the one that would get these painted covers. He could get artists that did stranger things than everybody else. I don't know how he did it, but he was magical that way.
Yeah.
Kel says, I thought Arthur Adams was really Kirby inspired. I agree. John Romita Jr. has was the similar as well. This whole discussion is awesome. Oh, great. Thank you, Kel. Here we go. Did Bret know or realize that the guy taking over New Mutants was going to be such a powerhouse in comics? Did you plan on leaving New Mutants at 55?
55? Do you mean at the age 55 or I think I started with 55. So.
Oh.
Was it number 55?
I think I did it into the last one was 82 or something. No, I don't think anybody did at the time. It was, things were changing really fast. And that group of guys.
Sienkiewicz, is that who he's referring to? Sienkiewicz that took over?
Liefeld.
Oh, was it Liefeld?
The New Mutants, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm assuming because that was Bill was before.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know my mutants because I was never into the X families and stuff. It's funny, I've said this on other streams that I did a bunch of X-Men. What was that series that Claremont came back to write? X-Men Forever, I think it was. I did a bunch of those, and I never worked with Claremont before, and I had never did X-Men, and I never cared to do X-Men because I never related to that strip. But taking that approach to it, I did some of the best pencils of my career on that because I wasn't hampered by what I thought these characters were supposed to be. I took them at face value and interpreted them the way I wanted to interpret them, and the pencils just flew off the page, and it really came out great. Even though I didn't have a lot of love for these characters, I had a lot of fun with the story that was going on. Does that make any sense?
Well, Chris's plots are so deep too. I mean, he always gives you so much to work with that it's very easy to really sink into the characterizations.
Yeah, and the characters were fun to draw. They were different looking. Each one was different and had a very specific look. And I thought that made it fun too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Googled Gregory Wright comics to remind myself who he was and found the caricature of his head from the old bullpen bulletins.
I remember that too. He had long hair then. I remember that.
Yeah. He was a long hair hippie freak.
Long haired. I was a mullet. So I had the glorious mullet.
Oh, here we go. Can you say mullet?
Well, here's a funny thing. After Bret moved off the New Mutants, I managed to hijack him to do Nightbreed, and to thank me for it, I became the villain in Nightbreed that Bret drew me.
That's a nightmare sequence, right? Yeah,
that's a nightmare sequence. Yeah, one of my best buddies was I had hired him to write the book, and then I hired Bret to draw the book, and then Bret didn't want to draw the book because he was afraid it was like too evil. So I had to convince him that it wasn't. Then I left staff, and I had no idea what they were doing after that because Bret, I think, only drew an issue or two before I left, and all of a sudden the book comes out, and there I am as the bad guy. I was like, wow, he really captured me. It's like we hadn't spent that much time together.
I think we must have discussed it, though. I wouldn't have done that without clearing it with you. Maybe. I don't know. It's a long time ago.
Sure. It was just it's fun to kind of look at it now and because we were always on staff at Marvel, we were constantly joking with each other, and we were constantly putting each other in comic books and poking fun at each other. So it's funny to look back now, because people always talk about what Jack did with Stan with Funky Flashman. People said, weren't you guys offended? I'm like, no, we did it it was funny. It's somebody actually spent time drawing me in a comic book. I don't care what they did to me. That's incredibly flattering, even though virtually every time I did appear, I'm always kind of a jackass in it. But it's fun, so I don't feel bad that when I've tweaked many a person in the comics that I wrote, I don't feel bad about it because they got me right back.
Well, I'm thinking now, if you didn't see it till it came out, it must have been Dan's idea to make him look like
I'm sure it was Dan.
So I've always loved Bret's take on the Scarecrow. Does Bret have any thoughts on how he came up with his version?
Well, I remember in the original Washington Irving story, he's exceedingly gaunt. Oh, that's a different Scarecrow.
That's a different one.
Yeah,
that's the Romney Mars Scarecrow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that Scarecrow too. Those were painted for that little Disney Adventures magazine that used to be. Check out. We did painted stories there. But I assume the question is about the Batman Scarecrow.
That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, but these are so beautiful.
Yeah.
I remember in the original Washington Irving story, he was described as being very Scarecrow-like. Ichabod Crane, he was so thin, that he just was like blown by the wind. And that's what I was riffing on. I thought, I'm going to make this guy so impossibly skinny that it looked like if someone sneezed, he'd fall over. And then, okay, well, how do I make that scary? And how do I make it move? So I really just set that as my task, is to almost imagine that he was a scarecrow, that he was that bony and lanky, and then make him as scary as possible.
I could have sworn I actually had one of your scarecrows somewhere.
Coney Island for sure. I saw girls on the D train plenty. Okay. Oh, some love for Bob Budiansky here. Whoa. Hi, Bob. Love your Transformers comics. I did the one Transformer comic that Bob did not write. Isn't that something?
Did Simon Furman do that one?
No. I can't remember who the writer was. It was I think it was Transformers 13 or 16. I think it was the Bumblebee story, and it was originally a one of the drawer ones, that they inventory stories. And then I don't know what happened. Bob couldn't write it, or Herb couldn't draw it, and they threw it in there. And it was my first job at Marvel.
A sort of reunion, although you didn't actually work together. So
yeah, right, exactly.
Character reunion, I guess.
Let's see. I don't know. Was that painting your concept or Bret's creation? In the girls thing, actually, I had done a sketch for it in the script because I figured out how I wanted it to go, and then Bret worked it through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's basically your drawing. I just inked it, or basically, made it fit the shape I needed.
Oh, well, there you go.
Describe that and get it to look anything like, I mean, how do you?
Well, that was it. It was easier for me to draw the damn thing than it would be to describe it, Yeah,
but that's what's funny. Sometimes, I mean, some of the stuff that people are going to see in this book, I don't know how you would describe some of it, because I read what you described, and then there's what Bret drew, and then there's what I finally did to it. So I mean, it's a great, really, collaboration, this book, because it's all working together really, really nicely.
I agree.
I don't know how you would describe it.
Well, there's so many changes. Yeah, there's so many changes of environment in it. That was a lot of fun to take Graham's script and try and figure out, well, what can I do with this to make it look really unusual and still readable? That's always the challenge. You can do any kind of crazy abstraction, but then people can't tell what it is. So it still has to somehow suggest that, but still read an environment or a character or whatever the requirement is.
Well, and that's what Ditko somehow, his Doctor Strange, when he started doing all the weird dimensions, it was still real. It was readable. It was very crystal. It was, you'd never seen anything like it. You still can't figure out how do you really describe some of these things, but it was very clear. It made sense. You went, yes, I buy that. Yeah. Because sometimes you see stuff and you go, that just looks stupid. But somehow, every artist will say, oh yeah, Ditko's Doctor Strange. And you can't figure, how did he figure that out? I don't know.
Well, it's not only the dimensional stuff, but the way he drew the magic was so simple. I mean, when you see the black and white artwork, it's almost not there, but all the shapes are so clear. You can tell who's winning and who's losing by the way their magic is behaving, and they all had distinct shapes. Just brilliant. Yeah,
one of the things that really struck me with Ditko was the one, I think it was like the first appearance of Dormammu, where he shows up in his dimension, and he has like this, like a smoke arch, and Strange is on one side, and his coat, or his cape, is sort of blowing through it. So he's able to establish different planes by having his cape go through that arch, and then his foot is overlapping something else. So you've got all these different layers of planes that in this dimension where there's no perspective, that I just remember seeing that as a kid and going, whoa, this looks like a real place. Even
yeah. I would not want to trapped in one of Ditko's nightmares. That must be pretty horrifying.
Yeah, yeah. And
Well,
the first ability fights is nightmare.
Talk to Ditko, you know, that's.
Well, I remember I so loved when he did those stories for Warren that were similar, but he rendered them in gray tones, so you could really see the dimensional aspect of it. You know?
Yeah, just really, really off the wall stuff.
Yeah, his black and white work was really great.
Like this, a few pages of hot girls in bikini bottoms. Graham knows how to get our attention. You're welcome.
The art of advertising.
That's right. Hey, you know, it's all about the story, folks. You know, it just happens they were coming back from surfing at the beach. You know, what are they going to be wearing? Long johns? I don't think so.
Not in July, anyway.
That's right.
If they go skiing, you know, then they'll be wearing the tight little long johns that with the butt flap that will pop open, you know.
The butt flap. Hail everyone, hail Graham Nolan, hail everyone else. Got Graham's stream up and running with some great guests as I work and sip on my coffee. Can't go wrong here, folks. Thank you, True Art 7.
Yeah. It was nice.
We got some new folks in the group here. Remember to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, all that good stuff. We're less than 70 hours away from being able to monetize this bad boy. So I need those watch hours. So go back and watch 31 Days of Monsters. Go back and watch Saturday Morning Western Roundup, or go back and watch other episodes of The Storytellers. In fact, watch the one with Walt and Wheezy, because Bret gets mentioned in that. So it's a nice, you know.
Yeah.
You popped in on that one, didn't you, Bret?
I got back. I was up on the mountain here. I was up at a town called Cottonwood, and I got back for about the last 20 minutes, and then I was able to go back and listen to it.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Yeah.
I was driving when it started. Yep, two of my favorite people, and two of anyone's favorite people who's ever met them. They're just wonderful.
Yeah, they're good folks. And I had just set up this new computer, and I had the app, the StreamYard app, but I still had its launching, whatever you call those launch cases that when you first do an app, you're supposed to throw them out, and I forgot to trash it. And so my whole screen froze up. I could see Walt and Wheezy talking and everything, but I couldn't scroll through anything. I couldn't switch the screens. I couldn't do anything. And I had to sign off just by like crashing it.
Yeah, technology, it's always supposedly going forward, but
yeah, well, my viewers have a drinking game that when Nolan messes up technology, you know, they're allowed to drink. So
we should have been drinking Chenu Brew while we were talking.
That's right. You got any left?
I still, well, I ordered two 4-packs of it, so I've cracked a couple of them. I tell you what, 42 North, that's the name of the brewers.
Yeah,
they did a great job. It's super cool to have cans of beer that have the artwork that you did on it, and one of them has my color on it. For those of us who like to drink, and I'm also a home brewer, it's a really geeky, awesome thing to have. Just have the can, but the beer was really very good. I like, oh, you know what? I bought it because I wanted the can, but I was very pleasantly surprised. So I've been sharing 42 North with our brew club. Nice. Unfortunately, they don't ship beer down here, but if you are in New York, you can go to their website and you can order some beer, and they've got a lot. If I ever come up by you, we got to go because they've got a lot of beer I want to try.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely worth ordering a couple of 4-packs of this particular beer. It's just an imperial stout, and it was really delicious. So
yeah. It's a 9% ABV too. So and it's an imperial pint, so you're getting the full 16. 2 of those boys, and you're like, whoa. All of a sudden, you're looking for a blizzard to go eat somebody's heart out with.
It does, but it's funny. It didn't drink like a 9%er. It was still very drinkable. So you don't have to be intimidated by the 9%.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's not like a.
It's not heavy and syrupy.
No, and it's not heavy alcohol forward flavor at all.
Oh, you don't get the alcohol. Well, that's an error in the, when you brew in it and you get that alcohol flavor, that's a mistake.
Yeah.
So they manage, and sometimes it's hard with the higher ABV beer to avoid that, but they did a really nice job on that. So shout out to them.
Yeah. Are you a beer drinker, Brett?
About all I can handle is maybe half a Guinness.
Half a Guinness. Okay.
I have no tolerance. It just puts me right to sleep.
Well, the high holy day is coming up, so you can have your half a Guinness soon.
Celebrate.
Yes.
You want to peek at the cover number 4 in progress real quick?
Ooh, yeah.
Hmm?
Oh, wait a sec. I'm going to put you on the full screen here. Hold on. I got to figure out.
Trying to. Well, nobody will be able to snag it, but.
Oh, nice. I haven't seen the color yet either.
Well, it's not actually colored. I'm working on it, so it's got a couple little things.
It showed up. Okay. Yeah. That's an interior page, right?
No, that's the cover.
Oh, that is the cover. Okay.
Yeah, it looks similar to the that one interior page, but I've changed up the girls. I want them to pop more because it's a cover.
Okay.
So I've just started putting the real color on it. So
is that number 4?
What's that? Yeah, that's number 4.
Yeah.
So that's like environment number, I don't know, 35 or something.
Yeah.
So we had. Well, it's funny because like with the covers, I'm like, okay, this cover is red. When this one came out, okay, this one's gonna have reds on it. Thank goodness it's like cover 4 because cover 1 has got the reds. So you want every cover to be, different sort of color schemes. And that's the same thing. Every new environment, I'm trying to make it different. So that the last environment was very easy.
Got a question for you, Greg.
Yeah.
Somebody pointed this out to me, and I didn't have an answer for them. You see that they all have their different colored magical colors.
Yep.
Jrjr has a blue one and a yellow one.
Yeah. Well, she's got in the first issue, she talks about having powers of land and water. So
right.
The land one is the yellow power, and the blue is the water power. She hasn't actually used the water one so much. So mostly she's been using the land. So she's got 2 colors because she's special.
Okay.
No, plus she's got the fun accent.
Not anymore. I had to change that.
You changed it?
Yeah, I had to change that. There's a good reason for it, and I'll tell you off screen.
But yeah, that was why she had 2 different powers, so I gave her 2 different. Yeah, it was weird. It's like, and then all of a sudden, because I was hoping to make sure every single character had different color powers, but that didn't quite work out as much as I was hoping. But that's okay.
I love that. I mean, now that I know that answer, I think that's amazing.
Well, again, it's all about everything has to serve the story. It can't just go, I think I'm going to do this cool color thing. No, it's got to have a point. To it. It's like even trying to figure out the colors that the characters wear. I mean, I gave it some thought. Because Abby, I tried to give her like what I think of as Florida colors, because she's from Florida. That seemed to make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I looked at a whole bunch of Florida vacation magazines and stuff because of. Between her and her flip-flops, I had to make sure I got the flip-flops right.
That's right. But you know what really struck me too is in the later issues, we have a flashback sequence that takes place in Key West where Abby grew up. And Brett hasn't been to Key West that often, if at all. Have you ever been to Key West?
Never been to Key West. Never been down that far.
But he nails it. I mean, I'm looking at the sequence where they're throwing the ball in the backyard. And you've got the fence there, and you've got the house behind it, and the foliage and stuff like that. You talk about immersion. I feel like I was in somebody's backyard in Key West in that sequence. You nail it, and also when when she runs down the street and sees her dad, those little picket fences and the clapboard style houses, you just nailed that. I mean, it really feels like Key West and not some other place that you just, drew random house,
Well, I appreciate that, Graham. I mean, I also think that's the job of the storyteller, is to put you in that place. And it is much quicker to research places on the web than it used to be. In the old days, you had to be pawing through old magazines at the library, So
I still have my files of pictures of various locations, so that I would know what things look like, and my sunset files and my
right.
files of rocks. And
I still have a few files of things that don't change, like animals.
Yeah.
Or some landmark like the Statue of Liberty or something like that.
Yeah. But like my file cabinet is right here with folders in it this thick, and I think it stops in like 1988 or something like that. So if you need cars, from 1980 up to 1988, I'm your man. I got this clothing. I've got the catalogs, like JCPenney catalog stuff that I tore out. Going up to like 1980 something.
Well, one of the remarkable things now is there seems to be a renaissance of beautiful models of cars, and not just interesting cars, but minivans and, Toyotas, just anything. They're making these beautiful, I guess with the 3D printing, they can do marvelous accuracy on the details. So I had to do a story that had a family minivan in it. And I ordered this thing from Japan, and the doors open and the hood, the doors slide. You can see all the interior, how the seats work and everything. It was fantastic.
Wow. Have you seen the new Bronco? That's pretty sharp looking.
I haven't seen the new one. But, like in the old days, we always had, well, at least I did, I would build models of things I had to draw all the time, like New York City police cars.
Right.
Things like that. And then, every 6 years they would change enough, you'd have to update. But they do that too. I mean, in recent years, I haven't had to do that many jobs in cities, really, I'm thinking. But I don't like working from photographs directly. I like to bend everything a little bit to make it fit with the rest of the stuff I'm drawing. So I much prefer to have an actual model. And I, fish eye it and skew it a little bit. And I tried to do that with photo reference, but the tools are much harder to use than my brain. I try to stretch it so it looks like it's coming a little faster at you, and it just looks all destroyed. It's easier to do it in drawing.
It works better when you bend it yourself. I can remember. I mean, it's really weird. It's like when I was on Ghost Rider and Mark Texiera was drawing it, and he was drawing at lightning speed, and I would frequently get Xeroxes of the breakdowns and have to color those. But fortunately, I knew what he was going to do at the end. I knew how much black he was going to use, so I could do it. But there was this one. There was like a car chase, and it was very simple. He had done the road so that the road looked fast somehow, and the car wasn't actually on the road. It was actually floating, and he had taken the car and kind of bent the car, in this way that it wouldn't. But somehow the sort of cartooning, this thing and bending the reality and fisheye, it just looked like this car was moving like crazy and flying. And it probably took him about 30 seconds to actually do the panel. But because he knew what to do with the car, and he didn't even have to draw much of the detail of the car. It was mostly, you saw the front end, the wheels and headlights, and the rest was all, just
speed lines.
Speed lines. Well, there wasn't even that many speed lines. I mean, he didn't need the speed line. He was able to actually, get that sense of speed without having to put all the the speed lines that, is very unpopular today. Heaven forbid we should put a speed line in to show any motion.
Right.
But it was exactly what you're saying, because he knew how to bend stuff, and he could do the same thing with buildings. He wanted this weird fisheye look, and he would just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, how did you do that? And he'd just laugh and goes, I don't know. Ha, he could do it,
I think it's the organic way that it fits with the rest of your vision is what makes it fit,
Yeah.
But that, some people can just, there's stuff they can just do it.
Yeah. If you have like a cartoony figure and you photo reference a car, or you use like a 3D modeling system and drop that type of thing in, it jumps out at you. You know, it's if you're going to use photo reference at all, you have to incorporate it into the style of the drawing that you're drawing. I mean, like even Neil, you know, used photo reference all the time, but he made it look like Neil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
when I work in animation, you know, you have the model sheets which set the style guide for the show. But there, because it's actually being animated, you can stretch things like crazy, and they'll usually look better. The more you distort things like, you know, the bat, what would you call it? His bat plane that he to the buildings. The Batman Beyond had wings, and we could, you know, you could really just explode the fisheye, and you almost couldn't do it too much, you know, because they would jump on it. The animators would even exaggerate it even more.
Well, as long as you don't have somebody who's in charge who keeps telling you, no, 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 draw it the boring way.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, well, because that I remember that happening. You know, at Marvel, where artists would do this cool thing, and then I'd have to go fight with Jim Shooter to allow this cool thing they did to get published, but it's not real enough. Like, it's a comic book.
We live in real. We want fantasy.
Yeah, we were talking in the beginning about the immersion and the storytelling. I think in addition to all these tools we're talking about of distortion is another way of making sure you're feeling the story through the character's emotions. Because to me, that's anything I ever read, that's what makes it. And this can be fiction as well, like prose. It doesn't have to be illustrated. If you can experience it through a character, it's so much more vivid to you than just having it described or being relegated to the position of an observer. If you can somehow get into, even if it's only you're following one character, the way they feel about it will make the story much more real.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So somebody's asking here if you guys have social media or websites.
I do. I don't spend much time on them, but I have a Facebook page called Bret Blevins Art, and I have the website is just called, I guess it's called bretblevins.com.
I think so.
Yeah, and there's some artwork on there. The Facebook art page has a pretty deep backlog of images on it, but I'm not a big social media guy these days. I'm hoping to get back in a groove, but I find it just eats up too much time for me.
I just put your website into the comment section there, Bret.
Oh, okay.
You know, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, but if you find me on Instagram, all you're going to see is pictures of food.
Well, don't sell it short, because they're amazing pictures of food, I gotta say.
Well, it's funny because there's a whole bunch of us, you know, in comics that actually like to cook. So there's actually a site that you have to be a comic person and be invited to Cooking with Comics. So it's kind of funny to have a bunch of people, you know, showing off their pictures of food and, you know, seeing, you know, who knows how to use an air fryer properly. And I have a reference book that I got from Marvel years ago that I think you guys would appreciate. They took all the old lettering from the covers and stuff, and they made a book that's just filled. That's a
lost art form there.
You know, with, you know, back when, you know, there was no fonts, so these were all totally done, you know, by hand. And we used to keep these around to kind of, when we wanted to do cover copy, we would, you know, bring some of these out and say, hey, what about, you know, something like this?
Yeah, fantastic.
And, you know, today, you know, it's crazy because everybody seems to be just so obsessed with trying to use a font.
Yeah. So that must be, I bet that's some Danny Crespi and Artie Sonic.
Probably is. You know, I don't.
Gaspar too, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's some. I'm sure. Oh, speaking of Scarecrow, I'm sure there's some Gaspar because he was on staff for a while. I would guess Danny Crespi put this together. But, you know, I've always really, you know, every once in a while it's fun to kind of look at this because I really don't like a lot of modern lettering. It just doesn't have any heart to it, you know. And when you're talking about, you know, storytelling, you know, the lettering it can be a huge part of the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like Kevin Nolan used to, I met Kevin when he was on doing the lettering for Moonshadow, of all bizarre things. And the lettering that he did was so evocative for that specific story and that specific J-Muth art. And if you talk to Chaykin about lettering, he'll like bend your ear like crazy, because Ken Brusinek's his guy and he understands what Howard's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that, a lot of letters today, they're just buying fonts and, putting it down and it looks okay. But, I can remember in the bullpen, just, watching, Jim Novak and Phil Felix and Rick Parker just creating this stuff. And you'd go out and say, well, I need something like this. And then you'd come back and you'd see them working on, they're like, how's this? And you'd be like, wow, that's like 1,000 times better than that crappy sketch I just gave you. But I kind of feel like it's almost getting to be a lost, art form, unless, you're using, the guys that actually used to do this stuff that moved into doing it digitally. And some of them, like Pat Brousseau he actually does the sound effects by hand and then turns it into a digital thing, because you just can't, it's not the same,
Is that book that you showed something that you put together at Marvel, or is that something?
No, somebody else put it together, and they gave me. I was given copies of that. I had a bunch of copies of. There was lots of like interesting style things.
See, I'd buy that book if they.
Right?
I swear I would. That I could look through that all just looking at the boxes and the hyperbolic text, and I love it.
Well, somebody might be able to maybe scan it for you, and then you can have a copy of it.
Walt is still working with John Workman on Ragnarok, and he has it lettered on the boards. And Walt loves seeing the complete page in the original.
I miss that.
I miss it too.
There was nothing better than when I worked in the office, I got to touch all this art. So I would see the pencils, then I would see the lettering. And then I would get to see the inks, and, we had, John Buscema, so these pages would come in and then all the artists would come in the office wanting to see John's pencils, which, were very broke down. And then it would go to Jim Novak, who would letter it. And people would come in, they'd want to see what did Jim Novak do when he lettered it, and then the Tom Palmer inks would come in, and you had to lock the door because, people knew when those inks came in, and they just would want, can I get a Xerox? Can I get a Xerox? I'm like, for God's sakes, we're trying to put a book out here, but it was something, because there was like, I remember thinking I have to protect this art team because it just didn't get any better to get it's like on a weekly basis, I'm chatting with John Buscema. And Tom Palmer taught me a lot about how to color properly. Back when I very, very, very first started, he taught me color theory. So that was, what pretty decent teacher to have, I guess.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny, I think, geez, Graham, it's like you would have loved meeting John Buscema. He was a guy's guy, and, just, whatever was on his mind, he just out it came, and it was frightening to watch him draw, because there was nothing he couldn't draw.
Yeah.
Like, okay, draw this, blah, blah, blah.
He was very gruff, but in a humorous way.
Yeah, but he was very nice. But he, much like Joe Kubert, he could crush your hand.
Yeah.
If you go to shake his hand, I
remember the first time I met him, I had whatever I was working on, and he was looking through it, and he's very nice about it. But he said, "You're working too hard." And, I says, what do you mean? He says, because unless you're inking this yourself, he says, if the inker knows what he's doing, you don't need to give him this much. If he doesn't know what he's doing, he's going to ruin it no matter what you give him. Which I couldn't argue with, but
yeah, he's not wrong. But he was so hard on inkers too. I mean, he really only liked his brother and who else? There was one other person I think that he really liked inking them. But most of the people we love him inking them, like Alcala. He didn't care for that.
No, he liked Tom Palmer. He and Tom got along very well. I had Don Heck ink him at one point. Again, Don Heck, another guy that people had shoved aside, And
Don was a great inker.
Actually brought him into my office and says, "You want to meet Don Heck?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And Don comes in and I was like, "Oh, you know what? I need an issue of the Avengers thing. Can you do that?" Sure. And he did a great job over John. And it just kind of showed me right away. It's very hard to ruin John's stuff, even in that little breakdown stuff. Everything is really there. So anybody that can really, because Don Heck, he could really ink, he could really draw. Al Williamson, Klaus Chance, and all these guys. Nobody, Bill Sienkiewicz. It always looked like John when they were done, but with just like this little flair. But that was interesting to see Don Heck inking John. And nobody wanted to hire Don at that time, so I was happy that I was able to give him. Give him some work, and I took him to a Christmas party that he didn't want to go to because he said he wasn't invited. And I said, "Too bad, you're coming with me." And nobody knew who he was, so I started
a Marvel Christmas party, and he wasn't invited to it.
Well, because he wasn't actually working on anything full time at Marvel. They forgot about a lot of these older guys at the time. So I took him to the party, and I started introducing him to people, and all of a sudden, all of these people who knew who Don Heck was, all these actual creators and professionals, they started surrounding him, shaking his hand and stuff. And he couldn't believe it because he had been over at DC where he was very much ignored, I guess. And he came over to Marvel and he couldn't believe how much appreciation he was getting just from other creators who loved his work.
That's great.
That's a nice story.
Yeah, I was so surprised, because I was like, oh, Don Heck, yeah, it was that was kind of the weird thing is the amount of really great guys that sometimes were just kind of ignored. Nobody knew who Stan Drake was when we started working with him. And Bill Sienkiewicz brought him over, and I was like, I know who Stan Drake is. So he got a lot of work for a while over at Marvel, as long as he wanted the work, because he didn't always want any.
He probably was only doing it because of the fact that he was doing Blondie. I mean, if he'd still been doing Julia Jones, he probably wouldn't have had time.
Well, apparently he needed the money because he was getting bled dry by however many divorces he had at that point. So, but
that's a common story.
I'll tell you what, though, any work that he did for me or anybody, it was great. And everybody was like, "Wait, you got Stan Drake? How'd you get Stan?" I said, "Well, I asked." But that's the thing. A lot of these guys, there's a lot of guys right now that why are they not getting work? I can remember running into Jerry Ordway at a convention a few years back, and he had no work. And I was like, how is that even remotely possible? Here's a guy that's been a successful triple threat. Well, I have 4 because he can color and paint. I don't know, maybe he can letter too. But I was very surprised at that time. It's like, why isn't he doing a lot? We all know it's very strange.
Yeah, well, some of the same reasons that Don Heck wasn't is that you get a younger audience, a younger rather editorial audience that doesn't really know the history of the business that they're in. Doesn't know or respect the people from the past because they're trying to build the future and build their own careers on the next superstar that they bring through, not some other guy, and so, yeah, unfortunately, there's no loyalty. And that's the hardest part for me is that, you could slave and you pull all-nighters and you save editors' asses and stuff like that. And then the editor leaves, and then that whatever favor you were owed is gone. Or the editor's still there and he doesn't remember the favor he owes you.
Yeah,
that's worse.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I was a new editor, I had my favorite new guys that I wanted to use, but I think I was very lucky because I started at Epic, and I learned, the old school way. So I was always using guys that nobody else, even knew about. I was the one that got Jim Steranko to come back and do a cover for us. Everybody said, "You'll never get Jim Steranko." I said, "Bullshit." And I got him to do that one cover. And it was a great experience getting to work with him. And then I had to fire him because he was supposed to do 6, but he couldn't do them quick enough for what we needed. And he was very gracious about it. But I was like, man, I was the guy that got him to come back and do a cover. And then I had to tell him, no, we can't do the other covers. And he still remembered me fondly years later when I finally got to meet him in person. And he was like, and he like remembered everything about the conversations and all of the, because he taught me a lot about, you know, for painted covers and getting the right transparency and getting it scanned properly. He did the logo, he did the design work on the stuff for free. You know, it was a huge education, you know, by just, you know, hey, let's listen to the guy that actually knows what he's talking about instead of trying to inflict my own will on it.
Yeah, he was a publisher.
Well, that was the thing, you know, so he knew a whole lot of stuff. So, you know, Marvel's production manager kept saying, we can't do that. We can't do that. And I said, well, I think you're wrong. Here's how I know you're wrong.
You're wrong. True Art. I think I missed the bit where you guys mentioned where Girls of Dimension 13 was going to become available. It'll be available at your local comic shop. Tell them to order the Aftershock comics. I'm sure they do already, but it wouldn't hurt to give them a poke. And it should be in stores in April. So there you go. It's not a crowdfunding book. It's a traditional published book through distributors. So, all right, gang. Well, you know, I've kept you up now for about an hour and 45 minutes. And I want to thank both of you for coming on and telling us, you know, a little bit about your careers and also pushing our book together, because I think it's going to be a great one.
You know, I can end with one other little bit of art here. I just noticed this is behind me. I won't show the whole page, but the monster you were talking about.
Oh, no. Wait a sec. Wait, I got to put you on full screen here. Hold on a second here. There we go.
There's that super creepy guy we were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Abraxas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that a double page spread? Or
yeah, this is from the last issue.
Oh, boy.
So.
Oh, I can't see it clearly.
Oh, maybe I can. The girls are popping in there at that dimension.
Oh, okay. Now it just refocused. The camera refocused. Okay.
Yeah, that's going to take a while.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to see that.
Thought I'd show this to Greg so I could ruin his sleep tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep great.
You know what? I love every time Abraxas shows up. He's like so much fun to color for some reason.
Yeah.
You know, I just, you know, once I figured out, you know, what he should look like, I love coloring him for, you know, because he's so weirdly formed. You can do all kinds of stuff. It's just trying to make sure that he feels more 3D.
Yeah.
That's a really great thing about the way we do comics now, is we can actually make stuff you know, we can give a little more depth than we could back before you could, you know, manipulate, you know, some of the line work and stuff. You know, but that's going to be a great page.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
And it's not even done digitally. Your ink, all these pages have been inked traditionally, right?
All on the boards.
Is that right? For some reason, I thought you were working in what's that program?
Sketchbook Pro. I used to lay things out. A Manga Studio called Clip Studio. Yeah,
Clips. That's what I was thinking that you had done. That I didn't realize those are original pages.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of effects pages where I use that. But what I've been doing lately is especially on a book that's this complex with so many dimensions, I'm laying it out full size 11 by 17 in the computer, because I can change size. I can, you know, flop move around, and then I get this drawing and oh my God, I didn't leave room for the balloons. I got to try to get down. And then print it out and either trace it as I did there, or depending on the page, you know, I have a little trouble if I print with a page with too many small figures. It's not very sharp. You know, it's not as sharp as I'd like it to be.
I see.
So trace it. So one way or the other. But I don't like inking on the machine. It just drives me crazy.
Understandable.
Are you doing everything on digital now, Graham, or are you doing, because the last piece I did over you, that seemed like that wasn't a digital piece, or was it?
No, it wasn't. That was traditional, because I wanted to have the original artwork as part of a perk level that people somebody could purchase if they wanted it. But the interiors will be digital.
Because you did the Shanu is all digital, right?
Yep. Yep. The first thing I did was the Expendables Go to Hell was the first thing I attempted to do digitally outside of Sunshine State. I've been doing Sunshine State digitally for many years, but I wasn't confident enough to do like real comic book stuff that way until I did Expendables, and it worked out. And I'm like, oh, you know what? This worked out pretty good. I'm going to do the Shanu that way too.
Yeah, the Shanu printed great. So, whatever way you did it, it doesn't, I didn't look at it and go, oh, look, he did this all digital. I mean, it looks, I really couldn't tell the difference, except for places where you did specifically digital things. But all the ink work,
certain brushes.
Yeah, it looked, well, just, there's just certain digital brushes that are digital, but like everything that you would have done, with an ink brush anyway, looks like you did it with an ink brush. And then, where you're putting a texture or something that you would have brought it in and put it on later.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm pretty amazed at what people are able to do digitally. It's kind of a shock. I never thought it would get to that point where you could do it and be satisfied, except for, I don't know how you can stand not having an original to hold in your hands.
Yeah. The thing I like digital is, in contrast to Bret, I like inking digitally because it's faster. I'm not cleaning things. I'm not dealing with ink that's gotten too thick. I'm not washing out brushes. I have a digital brush. It's a studio brush, and it behaves just like a really nice number 2. So I can get thicks and thins and stuff like that. And if I need something, a deadline, I can switch that brush with a click. And so there's no advantage to laying out or penciling the story digitally, other than, as Bret said, be able to move things around. It doesn't save any time because it's still the same laborious effort of thinking about all that stuff. But the inking part, that part, I definitely save time on. So that's why I like it. And, tiny little figures, I don't know if you saw Joe Jusko's post recently. He bought those glasses things that you can put in that magnify. And it's like, if I was working traditionally, I would use that because, those little figures, it's like, I can't, I got bifocal. So I've got this dead zone, and the damn things are always right in the dead zone. So digitally, I just pinch, whoop, blow it up as big as I need it, and then put the detail in and shrink it right back down.
Well, I like when you posted the time lapse of a page, and I like because you can see how you've laid it out, and then you can see where you've decided no, there's a better version, and you flopped something, and it's very quick, but you can see how quickly, because when you're under, I remember like when you're under a deadline, sometimes you're just banging pages out, and you just go, well, I'm just going to have to put up with that. Whereas when you're digitally laying it out, you can kind of go, you know what, this would be better. I can, it's quick. I can quickly flop this. I can quickly move. I can shrink this. I can, you no longer have those irritating panels that some artists used to do where the figures were like jammed up against the top of the frame, because they ran out of space and they didn't want to redraw it or something. You never get that. You never have to worry about that again, because you can just, okay, that's too big, or, oh, this would be better close up in layout. You can really kind of, I don't know, I guess it's more organic way of being able to tell your story faster, and play with it a little bit more. Cause sometimes, it's, the first round isn't as good as when you've done 2 more pages. You go, whoa, go back and look at it. I like those.
You should warm up
those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like inking on paper just because of the physicality of it. I just enjoy being able to turn it and stand or sit, and that constantly being on that glass surface starts to wear on me for a while. But it might just be my age.
I miss having the tactile feel of the paper is really great, and the feel of a nib, scraping against the paper. That the smell of the ink too. I mean, all that great, but somebody in the thing here said that where is it? He says, I know digital is faster and easier from what those who use it tell me, but taking away that extra revenue stream does not seem worth it to me. You know what? I've got 38 years worth of art in boxes and stuff. If I don't do any more, that stuff will just be worth more. So, yeah.
But you can always do anything, though.
What's that?
You can always do prints of any, anything you've done in black and white. You can always do prints and so then you don't have to worry about some kid snatching your page off your table at a convention and running away with it.
Well, now there's a new thing. It's like digital prints are being sold, and it's like they're putting some type of watermark on it.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's like a Bitcoin type. I don't really understand it.
Yeah, so
they're selling it for these digital prints for thousands.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars that have these encodings on them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, get to it.
Yeah, really. I gotta figure out this gig because.
And then you can use all of your originals to soak up spilled coffee.
Yeah, I want to be old school.
Yeah.
Just like the old guys. Treat my art like shit.
Yeah.
Just wipe up stuff.
Oh. Do you still have that Batman cover? Like Batman cover showed up again, the one where Batman's leaning over the desk with uplit in the background has got all the villains on the screen.
Oh yeah, I still have that.
That cover, yeah. It keeps it popped up again online. It's funny. It's like it's one of my favorite Batman covers. I told Graham I used to have that cover. There's something about that cover I really liked, and it was hanging in my studio in Virginia. It just used to hang near my stuff for some reason. So I thought that it was like it's kind of funny that stuck with me.
When something inspires you.
Yeah, but you never quite know what's gonna grab your attention sometimes. But I used to have several covers that were around. But when in the office we just had whoever drew the worst cover that would go on our door with and we'd be mocking that cover. So. And there was a John Buscema cover on the door. He'd drawn this horrible Fantastic Four cover, and the way he drew it, the thing was like coming like off the side, and somebody added to it, and it looked like the thing was sitting on the toilet taking a dump. And I was like, oh my God, it's terrible that this is a John Buscema cover, but it was a horrible cover, and I couldn't believe that John. But there was times when he just drew a cover and sent it in, and nobody said anything.
Might not even have been feeling well that day or something.
Who knows? I mean, he didn't like drawing superheroes a lot of the time, so
yeah.
He wasn't always enthused. You could tell when he was enthused. It's like he was enthused. When he drew that surfer graphic novel that he did, and that he chopped that thing up left and right because panels weren't good enough. So, he went home and cut them up, and, some of those pages were like these massive, weird, taped together monstrosities because he cared about that. He penciled and inked it.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which Silver Surfer graphic novel was this?
He did it with he and Tom DeFalco plotted it out, and then John drew. It was all splash pages. And then they had Stan write it. I wish I had a copy of it sitting here. But basically they were trying to get John interested in drawing something, and he goes, "Oh, I want to do Mr. Galactus." So we called it the Mr. Galactus graphic novel.
Mr. Galactus.
Well, I mean, between John's accent and Tom DeFalco's accent, when they were talking about the story, it just got hilarious. The thing of it is, Mr. Galactus is going to go. I'm like, oh my God. And then, I remember because we were there when they plotted it, and then John just went home and did it, and I think he got paid. I think he actually got paid for the story. Mm-hmm. And then they sent it to, I believe Stan did the dialogue on it, so it was one of those just funny things. They just wanted John to have a project that he really liked doing. But yeah, I wish they would have just called it Mr. Galactus. That would have been
that might be my new name when instead of Biggie G, I'm going to put Mr. Galactus.
We took John out. We were trying to figure out what we could do to please John because he was really hating the Avengers at one point, and we took him out for lunch, And we started explaining how the new guys were working, you know, and how they could barely do an issue of 22 pages a month. And he lost his mind and said, "That's it. I'm coming back. I can do 3 books, and we'll get this guy to do these." And he like came up with this whole plan to do comics. And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Well, no, but what the hell's wrong with you guys?" He just couldn't believe, you know, because he was doing 2 comics a month, you know, breakdowns, and he wasn't even breaking a sweat. You know, he would work his, you know, 8-hour day and send in the pages and be done. And he could have done more. That's it. Frank's got
Frank.
That's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun. And when he would come into the office wearing a suit, which always threw me.
Who, John?
Yeah, he would come in. Paul Ryan would come in wearing a suit. Bob Layton would come in wearing a suit.
Well, Leighton always had a suit.
You know, but you know, Bob's suits were a little more special.
Yes, that's true.
You know, John Romita showed up every day at work in a suit. You know, so you come in a suit, off came the jacket, and up the sleeves would get rolled up, and you know, he sat there and got to work and drank a huge amount of coffee.
Wow.
But he was
wine.
What?
But not wine.
No, well, not at work. You know,
Brett was talking about earlier, Kurt Swan. He went over to his studio and he had everything neatly arranged, and he had a glass of wine next to his drawing
table. You know what? That's almost like Terry Austin's studio, except for there was no wine. You know, when I went to Terry's house to take some pictures for some graphic novel or something, you know, I was like anxious to see his studio because I'd seen Burns' studio, and I'd been over at Upstart Studios, and I'd seen, you know, all these studios with huge amount of stuff. And, you know, Terry's got this little desk with a bottle of ink and a couple pens. And he's like, "Well, that's what I do it," you know, because he was just that simple. And I couldn't believe it. You know, I was like, "No, you're kidding me, right?" Nope.
All that magic.
You know, it was just very simple. But, you know, his stuff is, you know, super clean, you know, not fancy, just but yeah, it was just strange when you know, if you've ever seen, you know, Burns' studio at the time, you know, he had the huge desk and, you know, billions of books and all kinds of art. And your studio tour is great. Everybody should go watch that. If they haven't watched that, they should go back and watch your studio tour.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun. The artwork and oh my,
more flat files.
Yeah. I should have thought about that more and put more stuff out. But
you can do a flat file tour one day.
There we go. That'll be the next one.
You know, that's fun.
Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank you guys again for coming on and talking and promoting the book. And everybody in the comment section, thank you. Check out Bret's website. Check out the Girls of Dimension 13 link that I put into the comment section here. It'll take you to the Diamond Preview, so you can order a copy or at least tell your local comic book shop to order it for you. Saturday morning, Western Roundup is going to be The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, classic John Ford film. And next week, I'm going to work to see if we can't get Jrjr back on. See if he's free. If not, we'll figure it out. We'll get another guest. So thanks again, and we'll catch you Saturday morning for Western Roundup. Bye-bye.
Thanks.